Okay, so in this lesson, we're going to be talking about the power rule, which is the first rule we learn in differentiation. So in the power rule, we say that this number n is our power. So for example, if we had a function right here where we were asking to take the derivative of x squared, the power would be 2. Okay? And so this is the formula that tells us how to calculate this derivative. So what it says is given some power n, we bring that n out to the front of the function, and then we subtract 1 from it in the exponent, and that gives us the derivative. So for example, if we looked at the derivative of this function, x squared, we would bring the 2 down, and then we would subtract 1 from the exponent, so that would just give us 2x. Okay? If we did x cubed, the next function down here, again, the power is 3, so we would bring that 3 down in front, and then we would raise it to 1 minus that number, so it would give us 3x squared. All right? So notice that when I did these steps, I kind of showed us the in-between steps. If you're going to solve these, you don't have to do this every single time. Eventually, it gets so robotic that you can do it really quickly, and you don't even have to take this long to solve these derivatives. But the next thing about them is you'll see that if we look at this case, evaluating the derivative of 3x squared, when we have a constant out in front right here, basically we can just pull that constant out and then take the derivative of whatever the function is. So in this case, we can say this is exactly the same as 3 times the derivative of x squared. We just pulled that constant out. So, well, we found the derivative of x squared back up here, so we know this will just end up being 3 times 2x, or 6x. Again, this step right here was just to show you how we can pull the constant out. You don't have to do that every single time. If you wanted to go from this derivative in the form it was right here and just go straight to 6x, that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. All right, so let's look at a couple that are a little bit more complicated. All right, so what happens when we have something to the power of 1/2? Well, in this case, our value of n is 1/2, so we bring the 1/2 out front, and then we will raise it to the 1/2 minus 1. We do the exact same thing. It's always the exact same process. The power rule, nothing changes. It's always the same. So this would give us 1/2 x to the negative 1/2. All right. So from that point, you've basically learned all the tricks there are to the power rule. So what I would suggest you do right now is, if you have a chance, pause the video and try to solve these next 3 derivatives. If you can solve these on your own right now, you got it done. If you can't, go back and rewind the video, look at what we did, and you should be able to solve these by the time you have finished this video. All right, so if you solve them, if we do this first one right here, again, we can bring the 2/3 out front. We don't need to worry about that. Then our power is 1/2, so the 1/2 goes down. X to the 1/2 minus 1 is negative 1/2. So this whole thing would end up being 2/6 x to the negative 1/2, which is the exact same as 1/3 x to the negative 1/2. All right, so if we're going to do this next one right here, our exponent is negative. That doesn't matter. That's perfectly fine. So again, we bring that exponent down, so we would get negative 1/2 x to the, what's negative 1/2 minus 1? That would be negative 3/2. And there we go. We're done with that one. All right? And in this final one right here, we can just split this up into 3 separate integrals. So, or derivatives, I'm sorry. So in this first one right here, our power is negative 1/3. We again have a constant right out front. So we can keep that constant right there. We can bring the negative 1/3 down. And then 1/3 minus, or negative 1/3 minus 1 will be negative 4/3. Then in our second part, our power is going to be 4. And again, we have that constant right out front there. So we can say this is plus 5 times, bring the 4 down, x, subtract 1 from 4, we get 3. And then finally, in this last one, well, the derivative of a constant is what? The derivative of a constant is 0, okay? So if we simplified this whole thing, we would just be left with -4/9 x to the -4/3, and then plus 20x cubed. And there we go, that's it, okay? So that is the power rule. If you're still a little bit confused with it or you want some more practice, come in class tomorrow ready to ask questions and we can do some more examples.